Jonny Quest. I feel like when it comes to the classic Hanna-Barbera cartoons, this one always seems to get overlooked, which is a real shame because I think it's fantastic. This show came out in the 1960s, which after the success of James Bond, it became the decade of the spy genre. Mission Impossible, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Spoof, Get Smart, and of course, Jonny Quest. So what is the premise of this show? Well, as you might have guessed, it is the adventures of Jonny Quest. His father, Benton Quest, is a brilliant scientist who travels all over the world for research, investigating strange going-ons, as well as toppling evil plots. When Johnny's mother died at a rather young age, a CIA agent was assigned to him. We only ever get his code name, Race Bannon. Johnny also has a friend named Haji, which may or may not be an offensive stereotype by today's standards, but I'm a white woman. Do I really have the authority to say this or not? But anyway, he was an orphan, was later adopted by the Quests after he saved Benton's life in an adventure in Calcutta. This is then followed up by the comedy relief of Bandit, the dog. It's always so strange that the duo got their start with the iconic cat and mouse team of Tom and Jerry, but yet when they started to dominate the television screen, they were all about dogs. I wanted to talk about one episode in particular, two if I can get it out by Halloween. For today, I want to talk about The Curse of Anubis. It is a strange departure from the preceding episodes, as the show puts science over the supernatural. This one, though, not so much. The episode begins like every other one, with this awesome intro, which is just all kinds of chaos. Pterodactyl, the military taking down a walking eyeball, an undead mummy, and a whole host of dangerous creatures. After an explosion, things start to relax a little when we are given the character roll call. Following that exhilarating ride is the title card. Something I feel is a dying art, unfortunately. I love the design of the title cards in this series in general, but I love how this wouldn't feel out of place being in a Karis movie poster. It could have come after The Mummy's Curse. Enough of the Universal Mummy, let's get back to the story. We start with several establishing shots of Egypt. To the show's credit, I love that there's no subtitle saying so. We see there is an excavation of the Temple of Anubis. A lone guard is posted outside when two people subdue him. Quick note on the animation. I would compare it to Dragon Ball Z. The idea that the characters have a lot of detail, but there isn't a whole lot of motion. Yet, even with the limited movements, I think this opening scene is very effective. You get the idea the guard is knocked out, and then we move into the temple, where there is a priceless statue. It's even illuminated to show its importance. The statue is stolen when the camera pans over. The mummy rises, and while this is shot for shot from the intro, now we can concentrate on it. He moves slowly, but with power. He can even take out a solid wall. Once again, simple. From just these minor details, we can tell that the mummy is a force to be reckoned with. The thieves meet with their contact miles away from the scene. They show their prize to the boss, which he is pleased. However, the thieves, not so much. They fear the curse of Anubis. The boss does not share their concern, stating Anubis will bless them once the plan is complete. They have been previously instructed to take the statue to the ruins of Giza. I get the feeling they mean Giza, but whatever. The boss then makes a phone call to Benton Quest. Being in the era of Ma Bell, that must have been one expensive phone call. During the call, we are given the name of the boss, Ahmed Karim. Once again, gotta give credit. That sounds like an Egyptian name. It's a lot better than in Scooby-Doo, the episode The Tar Monster. They meet Ben Ghazi. Yeah. Ahmed tells Benton about an amazing archaeological find and wanted to invite Dr. Quest to look at it. He accepts the invitation when we pan through the window to find Race fast asleep. I should probably mention that the Quests live on a remote island. It's not easy to trace, and it's far away enough that Benton can do his work in peace.
We see Jonny and Haji try to take Race by surprise, but Race takes them instead. The pair blame themselves for being too noisy, but Race tells them it was Bandit that gave him away. Inside the house, Benton calls stating they are heading for Egypt tomorrow. On the plane, we discover two things. Jonny is eager to ride a camel, and Race finding an odd headline in a newspaper. I mentioned vaguely the theft of the Anubis statue. Race talks the theft over with Benton. Race thinks it's for money, but Benton has another idea. On the ground, they talk to Dr. Kareem about it. He says it was the enemies of the Arab people. We then jump to Jonny riding a camel with no saddle. It goes well, until Bandit wants to play. With that, Jonny falls off the camel. The group packs up and heads to Kareem's archaeological dig. Much to the dismay of Jonny, it's on trucks rather than camels. That night, the mummy is on the prowl. I love the intense shadow work here. It really sells the creepy tone. Under a full moon, the camp hears a cry in the distance. Dr. Kareem says it's either a fox or a jackal. Race, however, jokes it could be Anubis. The loading party doesn't take kindly to this joke, as they see Anubis as a real threat. Race realizes that's a big clue.
Whoever stole the statue isn't superstitious.
We then see Kareem's eyes actually blaze with passion as he says it was stolen by outsiders.
A quick side note, most of the dialogue here is meant to be Arabic. Now, I don't claim to be an expert in Arabic, but the accent just doesn't really sound right.
Just then, the loading party spots the mummy, and wow, this shot looks amazing in black and white. Kareem asks them what's the matter when they say it's the mummy. In true horror movie fashion, the mummy is gone, and Kareem sees nothing.
Another day's travel, and the gang finds themselves at an oasis. Here, Race and Benton talk in private. Benton is rather suspicious of Kareem, as most archaeologists, when they find something groundbreaking, they want to share it with the rest of the world. But why is he being so secretive about it?
Just then, Race spots a whip on the wall, reminiscing he used to be quite skilled at them. Jonny and Haji come through the door, urging Race to explore the oasis with them. Just then, Benton spots a scorpion. Thinking quickly, Race uses the whip and saves everybody from the poison. That night, the mummy is out again. Kareem is congratulating himself on his brilliant plan. While he claims nothing can stop him, the mummy peers through the window as if challenging their very statement. No one is harmed that night, but the mummy is clearly following Kareem. The next day, Race, Kareem, and Dr. Quest make it to the temple. Dr. Quest gets a little more suspicious of Kareem when he says he didn't obtain permission to dig there. He brushes it off, stating the borders change a lot out there. The group all get on a minecart, where they find the missing statue. From here, Dr. Quest knows Kareem is up to no good, and insists on knowing what the plan is.
I love this. How often do you see the hero get trapped and they're just like, look, enough of this pretense, just give us your monologuing already. Kareem is more than happy to oblige. He tells them that it will look like it was Benton and Race that tried to steal the statue, and the rage will help bring the Arab nations together. Race then asks the important question, why in the world would they stand around for this?
Kareem then pulls out a small firearm from his jacket, holding them there. But only temporarily. He shoots a nearby vase, revealing poison adders.
Once again, gotta love how Benton takes this so casually.
They go for high ground to avoid the snakes. Kareem leaves them locked in the room.
You will be discovered with the statue, alive or dead. It is immaterial.
We cut back to Jonny and Haji playing hide and seek.
Here is a fun one. Many people like to point to Scooby-Doo for having the vase gag.
But this show came out 5 years prior to that.
Now this is more of a visual gag. Essentially how it works is that the hero will dive into, say, this vase, open the lid, they're not there. But instead, they pop out of this one. And then a very similar thing, they go down, try to take off the lid, not there. Turns out they're in the middle one. And so on.
While playing around, They overhear the loaders saying Race and Benton have been taken care of, and that Jonny and Haji are to be taken along unharmed. To keep the family-friendly title, there is a chase scene with several hijinks. It ultimately ends with Jonny crashing a motorbike into Race and Benton's chamber. Kareem follows with the mummy slowly stalking behind him. With the family back together, Race warns them about the snakes. Haji then uses some quick thinking to use a flute to charm the snakes away. The victory is short-lived, as Kareem comes in with armed men. Bandit comes in to distract Kareem when Kareem tries shooting him. Now this is a side note I want to make. This is kind of a plague of a lot of action-based shows, but it looks like he's carrying something similar to a Beretta Minix with a very small magazine. I'd probably say he could get about 6, maybe 7 shots out of it. But in true action movie style, this thing has unlimited ammo. So with Bandit being shot at, he backs into the statue, having it fall on top of his head. This gives the appearance that the statue is alive.
As stated before, Kareem's men are very superstitious.
And run away in fear. Kareem fires a few shots in the air to make them come back, when the mummy draws slowly into the room.
Even Kareem is nervous at the sight of this apparition.
He attempts to provoke the mummy with his firearm when we hear this line.
Gosh, the bullets went right through him!
After hearing that, you know this being is not gonna stop until it does what it intends to do.
He grabs Kareem and smashes him into the ceiling until it brings the whole place down. The family is safe in the cave-in, and there is a small hole in the ceiling to escape. To Johnny's glee, they arrive in a herd of camels. They ride these camels back home, with Bandit getting motion sickness. And that's the end of the episode. Don't forget to stick around for the credits, where there is just as much action happening here as in the opening.
As you can tell, I'm a fan of the show. One of the big things I love about it is it feels a bit more adult. Now, I don't mean in the sense that it has like dirty jokes. I mean in the idea that it's smart, with rather well thought out stories, some of which I could just see being made into full movies if you just added another hour or so. Plot will keep the adults interested, and the fun hijinks of Jonny, Haji, and Bandit will help keep the kids entertained as well. As I mentioned, this episode is quite a departure from most of the other ones. It leans more into horror and the supernatural, as opposed to espionage. If you haven't seen this episode, or even if you haven't seen the show, I highly recommend it. Now here's a bit of a bonus for you. You may be wondering why I filmed this episode in black and white. Well, the first thing is, it's kind of my trademark. I mean, who else is doing reviews on a black and white TV these days? But second is how I discovered the series. Now, my dad originally grew up with this show when it first started, all the way back in 1964. What I remember, color TVs were so expensive back then that my grandparents had to take out a second mortgage just to be able to pay for it. So I would wager by the time this show came out, they probably didn't have a color television set. So I wanted to kind of honor that tradition. So as for how I discovered the series itself. So about 3 times a year, we'd go visit my grandparents. It was about 2 days' drives. We wanted to make sure that the trips were long, but not all the time either to save on money. I was just kind of walking by when I see my dad in the lanai room. He was very absorbed by what was on the television, and for me, I just thought it was another football game. But as I go to look, I see him watching Boomerang. On it was the tail end of an episode of Jonny Quest. Right now, I'm going to reenact my first reaction to that tail end.
Who's that? That's Haji, Johnny's bodyguard. Those M16s are pretty detailed for a kid's show. What? They blew him up? Oh man, this is amazing. I gotta see more of this.
I just always made a mental note as to how he looked when he was watching that show. He was just completely absorbed. He was absolutely loving it. It was like time just kind of went back and he was all of a sudden a kid again. Many years passed, when I found the entire series on DVD, and I got it to him for Christmas. Now, he's not a man that takes gifts very well, but as soon as he opened this up, I could just see his eyes light up, and even more importantly, he thanked me for it. After that day, much to the dismay of everybody involved in that house, he then watched the show non-stop for the next 3 weeks. Which to me was just the biggest compliment. Not only did I give him a Christmas present that he loved, but he was thoroughly enjoying it. And I did that. I made him happy. While the show didn't have the lasting power of Scooby-Doo or the timeless humor of Tom and Jerry, this show has quite a cult following, and I'm happy to say I'm part of that cult. Here's a bit of a fun experiment for you. If you ever run into a man that grew up in the 60s, just casually drop the name Jonny Quest. It's just fun to all of a sudden see them return to that childlike state of amazement. There may only be 26 episodes, but all of them are worth it. If you are going to watch it, I suggest watching only one episode at a time at nighttime. After all, the show originally premiered in prime time, and it just makes sense to keep that tradition going. Until next time, keep having fun.